Welcome back to the Vonage YouTube channel. I'm joined by the Vonage Developer Advocate team here today, and I'd like to just ask each person to provide their name and where they're from. And I'll go ahead and kick off. My name is Michael Crump, and I am from Washington State.
My name is Benjamin Aronov, originally from St. Louis, Missouri.
Jeremy Foster, and I live in Washington State, not too terribly far from Michael.
Alexandra Williams, and I'm from Massachusetts, but I've lived in New York City for almost 10 years.
Today, we're talking about what it actually means to be a developer in 2026, discussing how we learn and really how we sometimes burn out. So it's not just the tools, but it is how learning has changed, how AI is shaping the way that we work, and why a lot of developers feel like they're constantly trying to keep up in this day and age. So instead of starting with some noise, let's start with the shift. So the way that most people become developers, at least in my opinion, has fundamentally changed. It used to be learn a programming language, learn the syntax, code an application, compile it, and then hopefully you can get a job somewhere. Now it's more like learn AI prompting, use different types of tools that are currently available, and then test if the AI actually did it, and then just reiterate over and over and over again until you get a functional application. So I wanted to start the conversation today with my guest here, and I wanted to say that first off, do you think that memorizing syntax still matters in 2026?
Well, my question is, did memorizing syntax ever really matter? Because the only time I can remember syntax, like trying to memorize syntax, was when I took a intro to computer programming course in college, and that was not how I ended up being able to write any meaningful code. I mean, I don't know if you had any classes like this. I remember we had our lessons, and then we would have quizzes or tests where we would have a piece of paper and a pencil, and then we would have to write syntax with pencil and paper. And lo and behold, I don't remember if I passed that class or not, but I definitely didn't finish computer science that way. And it was only a few years later when I was able to actually start playing with code and building something that I was able to stick with it, because the pen and paper method for me just didn't make any sense. So I think so. I don't know. For
Yeah.
me, syntax never was really like a way to get into the code.
I agree, and I think also the expectation of memorizing syntax has changed as well, especially when it comes to coding interviews. Like those leak code style interviews where you have 45 minutes to answer a coding question, have it running in that time. I think the expectation will shift more towards how do you use AI tools rather than how much do you have memorized. So.
Yeah, we're really moving up the stack still, right? It used to be that we would need to be experts, maybe not on the syntax, that's pretty low level, and it can always be looked up, and we have tooling that really helps with that, but on constructs. So I need to understand the concepts of classes or functions or logical flow. And, those are the constructs that I need to understand. But now we're moving up so that I need to understand the concepts. And I think that what I, as an engineer, will need to understand to be an effective engineer is if AI has done a good job of following my instructions, if it's made something that not only passes the test, but is also going to work well whenever I deploy it broadly.
Absolutely. That's a great point. So I am obviously older than a lot of the folks here. And one of the things that I will just interject is that I took classes like COBOL, which code a business oriented language, where syntax and all of that stuff mattered deeply. Obviously, I switched over to the .NET sphere, and with that, I got really rich IDEs and tooling, such as like Visual Studio, Visual Studio Code, where if I decided that maybe I dropped off a semicolon or something like that for my application, the tooling got to be so great where it would show it. But absolutely remember some of that horrible days of trying to figure out syntax and getting programs to run. And yes, I will admit to all of you today, I also started developing an RPG, which was Report Program Generator. So yeah, back in the days. Excellent. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's move forward to the next question. So the next question is that are we seeing more builders and fewer engineers? And what I mean by that is that are we seeing more people just trying to get applications to compile using Claude or all of these other sorts of tooling, and fewer of just the pure engineering? What's your thoughts on that?
I'll jump in there. I actually tend to be fairly optimistic, and I think both and. I think we are acquiring a tier of builders, of software builders, of craftsmen that they know the business well, they know the domain well, and now let's welcome them into the ability to create an application for the first time. But it doesn't replace the engineering that needs to go behind it. Once again, I'll go back to this idea that I need to take I built my software and it works great, but now I need to take it to the world, and there's a lot of concerns there that need to be covered, and that's an engineer. You know, it might be somebody who understands the constructs in the cloud and how that's going to help this application to go broadly. But thank goodness we now have somebody else that can build that application. It's all the better.
Absolutely. And so just to kind of tie on to that one is that we've all know that like AI is great at generating code, but what's your thoughts on that with it having to not fully understand your full system? So you might have workflows, company policies, procedures, and things of that nature. Do you feel that while AI is able to generate code, do you feel that right now it can understand your full system or not?
What can I jump back to the previous question?
Absolutely.
Because going hand in hand with like the original question of does syntax matter, and now we have, you know, it's kind of the implications like what is a real dev or an engineer?
Yes.
Right. And so when it kind of clicked for me was learning Ruby on Rails, which I feel like for a lot of people was kind of original vibe coding, because there's what Rails devs always call like Ruby magic. It's like you don't really know how it works, but it works. And then slowly over time, as you need to touch different parts of like the application, and you see, oh, maybe, you know, at the beginning you get like a program running, and now that's kind of been even, you know, 10x with vibe coding, where it's just put in the idea, make it work, and then step by step as you build out other parts of the application, now you're touching the things. And I always remember whenever I first started learning, and I don't know, I think there was some guy I met who said, oh, well, Ruby's not, you know, Rails is not real dev. It's not like really being an engineer. And then I said it to my stepdad, who's he came up programming on mainframes in like the early 80s. And he said, well, you know, we stopped using punch cards too at some point. So
Yeah.
somebody was saying that's not real engineering either. When they first saw BASIC and COBOL, they said, oh my God, this is so easy.
Yeah.
And it's like now we look at BASIC and COBOL like,
Yeah, we're moving up the
Yeah.
abstraction
Yeah,
Yeah,
stack.
exactly. Yeah, there's always layers of abstraction. And I think we're going to continue down that path. It's important to understand what's happening behind the scenes, but, you know, I think we're going to get further and further away from assembly language as we have into more, you know, plain text programming.
But somebody on Earth will still have to understand the assembly
Exactly.
language.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's
And
important.
I don't know, Michael, but you may at some point think that you would have been better off sticking with COBOL.
Right.
That's exactly right. Okay, so the next question that I have here is based off of a conversation that I've had already, and this is that are the computer fundamentals more important than ever or less? An example of that being we graduated, or several of us graduated in computer science. Things like polymorphism was really important for myself to learn. Will tell you that I graduated in 2002, so it has been a while from now. So I just want to pass this question to the group. Is things like polymorphism, inheritance, and some of the key concepts that we might have learned during our college days or maybe even high school, are those still important for developers to learn in 2026? Yes or no?
I think it's important for optimization, but not necessarily readability. I know a lot of when I first learned how to code, it was not just like can your code work, but can other people read it? And I think that might matter a little bit less. I mean, it's still important, but I think it will matter a little bit less because humans won't be the ones reading the code. At the same time, when you learn about, like, was it big O notation, right, and like optimization, all those things, I think that's still important when it comes to those programming fundamentals. So, yeah, I think yes and no.
I think that again, we're raising up the abstraction stack here, and there's more to learn, and there still is the person that's going to need to understand what the lowest level looks like, if for no other reason to optimize the entire stack. And so, do we need to learn these concepts? It depends on if that's where on the stack you want to work. And it's getting bigger, and it's getting less likely that I, as an individual engineer, will be able to understand. I never have been able to, but never will ever be able to understand the entire stack. So I like the fact that we get to kind of choose where we want to specialize. Do I want to be a Ruby on Rails developer, or do I want to, do I want to go low level and get into the bits?
Yeah, yeah. And my answer, I think, is you just got to make sure that in your Claude.md you put use solid principles.
Yeah.
That's all you got to do. That's where I want to sit in the stack.
Thanks, everybody, for the great insight on that. Okay, so if the way that we have learned has changed, I think some of the tools that we have used to learn has really changed even more. So for a lot of developers now, the first place that they go when they reach a problem absolutely isn't the documentation. It isn't even sometimes Google, but it is some sort of AI. And in my opinion, that is a massive shift. So I want to pass the question along. Have any of you changed how you learn because of tools like ChatGPT or Copilot? And then second part to that question is, do you still read docs in the same way that you used to?
I'll start. So absolutely, it's changed dramatically. And I think this is it. Before the AI revolution, I would have relied on kind of a lot of reading to get a lot of kind of new concepts, or more often than not, talking with other people to get the concepts. And then I would go to the docs or to search engines whenever I already had the concept and I was looking for a specific thing. Okay, how do I implement that thing or this thing or whatever? Now I can bring those conceptual questions to AI. So for me, that's the shift, is that now I can ask a conceptual, architectural question to AI and get some steerage at the very beginning of my...
Yeah, I agree. And I can tell just by the amount of Stack Overflow tabs I no longer have open. Like, I think my entire engineering career up until maybe a couple of years ago, like, every window I had was Stack Overflow, just asking random questions that now I can just ask.
Or just like all kinds of tabs.
Yeah, exactly. All the tabs.
By one tab.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is cool.
Yep. So I no longer have that. And I agree. I think I start with, like, I want to understand, or usually I especially if I'm working on code that already exists, like, I have this baseline template, right? And I want to know, like, okay, what other fields can I add? That's when I go to the docs and see, how complex I can get with this particular function or whatever I'm working with. But it is now much easier to go to ChatGPT and say, hey, here's this code. How do I fix this? Or how do I, make it do this particular thing?
Yeah. So. I think that there's kind of two background concepts that, like, determine, this kind of answer. But one, I think, is that developers, sometimes we forget that we're people too. Yep. And just like in any other field, developers have different personality types, right? So Jeremy, I imagine, has a personality type that's like more analytical, wants to understand every point about like some big concept and really understand it deeply.
You know me well, Benjamin.
Yeah, very well. Benjamin, on the other hand, is just like trying to fix a problem today, figure out how to solve that little thing, and just find a little bit of nugget that like unlocks him, and then he can move forward. And looking at 50 pages of docs to get that answer has always been a little bit intimidating. And it's funny now that you remind me of like the 15 tabs open, and I would
Yeah.
have like 8 different browsers with 50 tabs.
Yep.
And I'd be so scared to close it out because I'm just like, oh, I told myself I'd go back and really figure that thing out. And then finally, 25 days later, I get the warning from like the laptop that says it's time to restart your computer.
Yep.
So I think it definitely depends on the personality, where ChatGPT is great, or any AI is great for if you want to go really deep, or you're just looking for that like kind of, I need the bullet point answer to solve this. And so it's interesting for a more analytical person, like kind of the more classical engineer who, because it used to take, like, you have to know how the whole system works before you can make it do anything. Now I think it brings in more of the other personality types. And then the other point I think that's interesting about it is with AI, it's supposed to make us more efficient, right? You can just get the answer you're looking for. But at the same time, I feel like we're increasingly feeling like we have to be doing more, and there's like more pressure. So does that mean that we're actually spending less time with the docs? Because you have this, there's always like this background pressure of like, all right, get the job done, get the job done, get the job done, instead of, okay, well, I know this topic is, 45 pages of documentation. When I finish the 45 pages, I'm done. You can always keep asking the AI more and more questions, and it's like overwhelming, this limitless information that I don't know. It's a good question.
You know what's a fun feature for that is I'm using a lot of claude-code right now, and in claude-code you can have you ever used the /btw command? By the way,
Okay.
so like it's working on something, and it might be another 3 minutes, and I'll say by the way, can you teach me 5 other command line arguments besides that one? And so it's kind of like going to the docs, except I can kind of do it interstitially in between while it's working on other things.
That has exactly been my experience. So I have used Linux for different times and periods of my life. And I remember especially like using the man command for manual, and then trying to see what the syntax is. And today, if I have something that takes maybe multiple parameters, maybe it's formatting a hard disk, and where I am wanting to be very careful that it doesn't format the wrong disk, I might take that command and put it back through AI and say, hey, is this right? Is this going to do what I hope that's going to do? What about these other optional parameters, like maybe setting a volume label? Pretty cool stuff, easy to do as long as you know the syntax. So being able to break out those long commands and figure out what's going on with each is absolutely valuable to me in my learning process. So let me throw something a little bit more controversial out here. So for the group, are we creating better developers faster? Or are we starting to create more developers who rely on AI for everything?
Again, developers are humans, and I want to ask the question: are humans getting smarter with AI, or are we just getting addicted to it?
Yeah.
I don't know. Do one of you have an idea?
I like to go to analogy. That's where my brain goes. And I go to the analogy of driving and my GPS. And now whenever I go somewhere, I always put it in my GPS, even if I know the way, because, it's just then I know how long my kids in the back seat won't ask me how long it's going to be because they can see the estimated time of arrival. But I don't necessarily know the layout of the town as well.
Or the names of the streets.
Exactly.
I've noticed that about myself.
Or the fastest way to get there. Before, I was doing that optimization in my brain. However, I have to ask myself, is that a skill set or a time commitment that I want to take right now? And I don't. I don't want to do that. I would rather rely on that and have good family conversations or think about my next coding project or whatever. So it's a decision that we get to make.
Yeah. Because when I first heard that, I was thinking of just the fact, and I think we spoke about this recently about how, there was like React, right, and Node.js, where people were learning not JavaScript, but they were learning these frameworks on top of it.
Yeah.
And I think you can make that same argument where like maybe you might not know the fundamentals of coding or programming, but you know how to create an app with these frameworks. And I think the same analogy with AI, right? You can create a app with AI, but do you know what's happening behind the scenes? So I don't know if AI makes a difference of like if we're creating better developers and more so just like um, are we evolving? You know, I don't know the answer to that, but there seems like there's some similarity between both of those phases.
Yeah. You know, I would definitely be faster at head math if I didn't have a calculator. But I get a lot more numbers crunched with my calculator, and I prefer that.
And also the accuracy. Now, since just I brought up the accuracy of like those number crunches with the computer, this also begs to question another thing here, and that is sometimes AI isn't right, and there's sometimes that AI doesn't know. A recent example of that was that there was a story that was published, and when I tried to search AI to get a better grasp of the ending, it came back and stated that it wasn't out yet, and it had been about 8 days since it had been released, but there was no data trained on it. And the information that it presented back on this story that I was looking up was very outdated. So that is my next question, or that leads me up to my next question. What happens when something goes wrong and AI can't actually help? What do you do next?
Well, do you ever ask a colleague a question and they're wrong?
Yes.
Or do you ever find yourself wrong?
No, never.
Yeah. I mean, I know from my personal experience, I always double check with the internet, right? It's like AI tells me something and I'm not sure, I'm not familiar with this topic. I need to go find a source that
Yeah,
validates
something
it.
you trust.
Yeah. And I think you just have to I think you might have to use that method because, like you said, like AI can be wrong. And at least for me, like the best way I can go about it right now is just finding other sources.
I kind of love that what is going to be highlighted in the next many years is trust, which feels like a human concept, but trust is going to be very important because, for instance, when I ask something about the Vonage APIs
Yeah.
to my vanilla chat agent, it's good, but it's not great. And then when I configure the MCP server, the documentation MCP server, it's amazing. And that's because it comes from the Vonage documentation, which if I'm talking about the Vonage API is my source of, that's what I trust.
Yeah.
The same people that made the API made the documentation and made the documentation MCP server.
Yep.
In this next segment, I want to talk about different types of traditional tutorials and how they used to be the default path for developers looking to learn something. So things such as reading a blog, following step-by-step instructions by doing things like copying and pasting code samples. But right now, those things have changed so fast that things like static tutorials that we may have, or maybe even videos that we have, can come out of date very, very quickly. And also for the average developer that has their normal day job and they're trying to keep up with everything else, it can be very, very difficult for them. So my next question for the group here is, do you think that the traditional, and I put air quotes around the word traditional here, tutorials are dying, or are they just evolving?
I think that the concept of a tutorial and the concept of AI are not in conflict with one another. It has been our mode that we have humans that kind of somewhat arduously create tutorials. They understand something and they research it and they document it. They take screenshots, they do a lot of writing, and they end up with a tutorial. And now I ask AI, and what it gives me is essentially a tutorial, but it was authored by AI instead of a human. And I think we'll move forward with tutorials are just a way of telling somebody how to do something. Do this, and then this, and then this. And that's what we need as humans. Whether that's made by a human or an AI or a human using an AI is beside the point.
Got it. And this brings up a point that I wanted to ask Benjamin some feedback on. And that was that Benjamin created a blog post, and it was on learning Laravel. And in that, he had a post where he kind of walked through an approach of, hey, I don't really know this framework. I'm not that familiar with everything, but here is the way that I have learned how to do it. Are our traditional tutorials where we have put a lot of code, are those starting to become something that is outdated? And maybe, Benjamin, if you can give us a little bit more context on what was your thoughts behind that blog post and coming from it as a different angle that wasn't directly, hey, here's the code that you paste into your application and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, going right in line with everything we've been talking about. Um, I don't. I think everybody, anyone who's writing code these days, understands that the the way you go about it has completely changed. It's like and now it's like more important that you just start with the why. Like, why am I building something? Where in the past, you had general programming tutorials, which was like, oh, learn how to build certain kind of app in certain kind of language, or learn a new framework, or do it in this, use a specific kind of API, and all that kind of general coding stuff. AI is so good at putting together, as you said. Like, as you're speaking, Jeremy, I was thinking that, yeah, these tutorials are just how to get you to an objective, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the AI makes the getting to objective very personalized.
Yeah.
Right. So you don't have to do these generic posts. And now we're moving in. It's funny because as you were talking, I was like, oh, I think maybe the future is going to be of tutorials where someone actually sits down and writes it. That's not an AI kind of tutorial. Is always going to be maybe with a group or at a certain time, because you're getting that extra bonus why. I'm doing this, I want to build this specific app because I'm building it with somebody else.
Yeah.
Because when you're alone, you could build whatever you want. The AI is going to be always there with you. Mm-hmm. I've been thinking about this question a lot. Like, what is the future of written developer content? How are we learning? And that's what made me kind of write this Laravel blog post, inspired by Jim, our favorite PHP colleague. So not only did I not know Laravel, I don't think I had written PHP, I think, in like 12 years or something at that point. So it was very much, what's something interesting and not just a very basic, not just like do something small with framework that I don't know. Try to build out like a pretty significant app. Mm-hmm. And for me, always, because I would find tutorials, again, it was very objective based. Like, I'm trying to do something has nothing to do with any tutorial out there. Mm-hmm. I don't want to just learn for learning's sake. I want to build something, and then I find a tutorial that kind of matches 60% of what I'm trying to do. So let me try to take the 60% that applies to what I'm doing, and then make it work. And I don't know if that's like really relevant anymore, right? Because the AI can do it exactly what you want. So now I think any of these tutorials where we're just showing off cool features, it really needs to be something that's interesting. And then the way that I went about writing that post was, yeah, you're not going to copy paste like each line of code, but what you might do is look at the prompts that are written. So something that we've been playing around with in the Vonage team is thinking about maybe creating prompt libraries. So if you want to build something similar to what we've shown, mainly show the audience a cool app that we were able to put together, maybe with Vonage technology or not, and then not do step 1, step 2, step 3. But if you want to be inspired and you want to kind of grab some features, this is exactly how we set it up in the agent, and then you can put that into your own agent and see how closely you can compile, get it to build the same way. But it is definitely an interesting time where, everyone's attention span is super short. Mm-hmm. Nobody's copy pasting code. So it's an interesting time where tutorials are definitely changing.
Great. That does bring me to another topic, and that is video content. So here today we have a number of folks that works and does our video content. And for myself, the reason that this has come up a couple of different times is that I have a couple of courses that is on Pluralsight. They're video training related courses. I know I'm not trying to advertise those here. The information's all outdated. But it does bring me to when I created those tutorials or those video tutorials during that time. If you were to try those today, absolutely none of it would work. And what would be interesting to me would be if I had approached this with something, such as maybe, claude-code or something of that nature. And again, going back to the prompt library, and maybe I shared with the prompt, maybe that video would be a little bit more relevant today versus somebody trying it. I believe that we've all went to Coursera or YouTube's Academy and things of that nature where we try to learn a course. And for the most part, most of those courses are outdated very quickly, especially in terms of things like JavaScript and all the millions of different front end kind of networks. So I'll pose this question to some of our video people here today, and that is that how do you see the future of video content?
I don't know. I still think it's necessary. Also, I think in a world where it's where we're moving towards no code, I think a lot of the focus might be more on the UI, right? Like maybe we don't necessarily need to show every, or maybe more people will go to LLMs for the coding side of it, but like they might need help navigating, claude-code or copilot, the things that aren't, the code, right? The UI of it all. So I think that might be where video might shine a little bit more. But I'm not sure if there's a way for it to not be outdated because UIs change, code changes, frameworks update. So I'm not sure if there's a way to prevent that, but I do think people might be needing help in a different way than we've seen before.
I'll add on to that.
Yeah.
I'll try to look further in the future and say I think eventually it will be unnecessary because I think that ultimately AI is going to be able to generate dynamically video. It's going to be able to generate UI. And there are going to be a lot of things where really it's just a derivative of our intent. Like, what do I need to do? I need to instruct somebody with a personality and with a certain tutorial and a certain sequence. And so I'll generate what's necessary in order to instruct them. And for now, video is absolutely necessary. In the future, it may still be the mode, but how will it be generated? It may not be generated by us literally recording the video.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it's still video.
It's still a
right?
video.
It's still video, and especially all the talk now that the younger generations are becoming post-literate, that they're, I don't know if you've heard this, but but that people are like not reading. And so even if, so it's not like the video generation, the content generation, the way we think about it now, write a script, record, edit, outdated, re-record a year later, update the title, JavaScript in 2026. It might be on the fly, AI is doing it, but it's still going to be, I think, visual learning is the future because people just don't read.
Agreed. There's something fundamental about video, about moving pictures, right? And audio. These are fundamentals. I think reading is even a fundamental. Maybe there's...
No, I agree.
Yeah.
But for you watching this video at home...
Yeah, you're not reading right now.
Yeah.
We may be spritzing, however, as opposed to traditional reading.
Yeah, exactly.
Great points. So, if learning itself has changed this much, it's really no surprise that developers are feeling the pressure. So this brings me up to the new reality, and that is that there is way too much to keep up with. I know for myself, I have lots of struggles keeping up, not just with AI, but other sorts of web technologies and tools. And one thing that I've seen that's very common on places like dev.to and some of the other kind of forums where developers hang out is the talk of burnout and really just signal overload. There's too much to keep up with. There was a gentleman at Microsoft in a talk, and I apologize, but I do not remember his name, but he works on AI full-time, and he stated in a talk that he is not able to keep up with AI with his full-time job. Now, That is a big statement in my opinion, because somebody that gets 40 hours a week to work on something, you would think that they would become pretty good at it, or they would be able to process lots of different data points. And with him stating he struggled is something that I wanted to include here, because I think that we are also kind of have been ignoring some of the developer burnout and the signal overload that comes with this. So besides like new frameworks, new tools, Web3 or whatever is next, there is a few things that I think that we can talk about to kind of help everyone kind of help move forward with that. So my first question to the group here is, do you feel like it's harder than ever to stay relevant? And please just share your personal opinions on that and be vulnerable.
I don't mind being vulnerable. While there definitely is some truth, because it just feels like every day, AI is just making it easier for more and more content, for more and more products, for more and more everything to get better, faster, stronger. I think that the burnout is more or less been pretty consistent ever since there's the invention of endless scrolling.
Yeah.
Like ever since we started having endless scrolling feeds. I remember coming up as a junior dev, I don't know, whatever it was, 10 years ago or something like that. And it already felt, as soon as you were starting to a little bit enter the industry, it was just like, oh, you got Angular 2, React, whatever all the new frameworks were at any given time. And it was just like, and then everyone's bombarding you with, these are the top, these are the best salaries by tech stack. Yeah. These are, you don't want to, I remember whenever I got into developer relations, which was like fairly early in developer relations, and people were saying, oh, that might be over. Like you might want to learn the new thing. And it's just, I feel like ever since, if I have to think about it, it's really the endless scroll, because you go to each website and there's just more and more and more. And it feels like you got to master everything, especially for someone who's not that old, but old enough to remember when I when I was a kid, I'd wake up, I'd read the morning paper, and it started and it finished. And so like you feel like you could start and finish something, but with the internet, there's just never been a start and finish. So it's like, in my opinion, it's always been bad. It's just, it's the same question as people are like, I think the job market's the worst it's ever been. It's always been the worst it's ever been. Mm-hmm. If you're looking for a job, it's always the worst it's ever been.
Yeah, I agree. I had that same experience when I first started out. Like, I need to learn JavaScript, I need to learn Java, I need to learn Python, I need to learn all these different languages. And then later in my career, I found that, like, as long as you understand what's happening in the background, then you can kind of use any language, because it's just, again, an abstraction layer to all do the same thing in the end. And I think maybe AI might turn out that way. I think there's a lot of, like, trial and error, but I think it will kind of, like, even out, plateau, and we'll see that there's a bunch of different AI tools, but ultimately they kind of solve the same thing. So I think it more depends on, like, what's best for your use case, and also I think what's the ecosystem around it. Because I know with languages specifically, it's nice when a bunch of people use that same language or that same framework, and you can look online and get opinions. And I mean, well, now that's kind of different, right? Because we're not using Stack Overflow anymore. So, maybe you don't need as much of an ecosystem with AI just having that knowledge.
But I can tell you, one of my good buddies, he was using code for, like, I don't know, a good 3 or 4 months before I ever jumped in. And then finally when I jumped in, because I knew he was kind of doing it, but I don't know, at the time I was still using OpenAI or whatever other models and jumping back and forth, just on Cursor. Yeah. And then I used claude-code, and I was so mad at him. I was like, you've been sitting there and not telling me how much better this is. He's like, I don't know, I thought you saw on Twitter that it's, like, doing pretty good. And I'm like, no, that's what you need to pull me in. Like, right. What's the point of having dev friends if we're not pushing each other to use the best stuff?
Right.
The evolution of the knowledge of man is such that we have, there's information there is increasing, of course. We learn more. We stand on the shoulders of giants. And we all know that it used to be possible to be the Renaissance man that knew everything there was to know about math and everything that there was to know about history and so on and so forth. And we've specialized because there's more that's known. And now we're specializing. And I may have aspired a few years ago to know everything there was to know about my programming language. Well, before that, people were aspiring to know everything there was to know about computer science.
Right.
Well, now I not only don't know everything that there is to know about one niche, but it's moving so fast and there's so much out there that I should really probably figure out what I'm going to specialize in.
Right.
And I always advise people now, don't try to just be a computer science generalist.
Yeah.
Pick a domain. What do? You build airplanes? You build cars? Do you work in retail? What is the domain that you're in, and then apply your technology skills within that domain.
Absolutely. So let me ask you another kind of follow-up to that. What is maybe one tip that each of you can give to the audience of how you're handling and dealing with that based on the assumption that you already have developer burnout or you've had it in the past?
I do something very, very different from computers. I do something that is, I get away from my keyboard and I pull weeds out of the ground. That's my,
Yeah.
I got to go touch grass.
As a former developer that has burned out, I will say that something I learned is that I don't need to be 100% at everything, right? Like, I think it's okay to just like, and going back to what you said about like just focusing on one domain, I think it's okay to just like have a surface level understanding of certain domains, but then go deep on other domains, right? I think they call it like the T-shape, right? Where it's like your surface level and then you go deep
That's
on one
vertical.
thing.
Yep.
And I was someone that used to feel like I needed to be really good at everything. So I think if you find what you enjoy, then maybe stick to that, get really good at that, but then everything else, like be able to have a conversation about it, but you don't need to know everything in depth.
Well, and let me add on to that because it's really relieving for me to hear a fellow developer say that. And it's actually really relieving for me to hear about an AI specialist who can't keep up. That's encouraging to me because I can't keep up either. I think that as AI advances, I need to focus on being a human. And as a human, this is what I can do, and it's limited. It's really limited what we can do. In fact, that's one of our defining features. And in 20 years, it'll be even more accentuated that we are limited, whereas, AI can know all the things and we can't.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Hey, speak for yourself.
Keep trying. You keep trying.
Yeah,
You'll
yeah,
just be
yeah.
stressed out, Benjamin.
Well, I will say that like I burnt out before even being a developer. I've burnt out in many different periods of my life. And one thing that always really helps me is that I find that when I'm burnt out, it's so much about being in the same routine of feeling like, oh wow, I'm still stuck on the same problem. So like that means I got to wake up earlier. I got to drink another cup of coffee. I got to sit more hours in front of the computer. And if I just spend more time at it, then I'll finally get past this. And it's just trying to put the weight of the world, on my shoulders and being like, nothing in my life can continue until I get this thing done. And the biggest mental health like kind of unlock for me was realizing whenever I start to feel, and for me it's like very clear, like I have literally I can physically feel when I'm burnt out, I sleeping poorly, irritable, bones hurt, like for me it's very clear. And the biggest thing is that I will go somewhere that I just don't go in my day, like literally physically, if it's take a car ride, like, an hour outside of the city or a bicycle ride or just walk to another part of, town where I never really go, and just having that little bit of perspective and being like, oh, yeah, this thing will, whether it resolves or doesn't resolve, life will go on and everything will be fine. And it kind of brings me back kind of centered.
Have you tried pulling weeds?
Only when I got paid for it as an 8-year-old.
Yes, that's really, really, that's interesting to hear. For myself, regarding developer burnout, the one thing that I will state is that For the developers that's out there, please do this one thing, and that is take your vacation days. I have been a manager at 3 companies now, and at all of the companies that I've been a manager at, I have had to tell number of employees to actually take off. And I have seen that a lot of workers just think that they need to always be online or that they always need to be available. That is a gigantic trap. Obviously, I'm telling you this because I fell into the same thing. I have had problems in my life with like wanting to overwork and to be a bit of a workaholic. And some of that for myself personally is because I have worked a lot of remote jobs and I feel like I need to overcompensate for the workers that are actually in the office every day. So I might be online even later than others. I would definitely chime into conversations because I maybe feel like they thought that I wasn't there or I wasn't active or anything like that. So take your vacation days, and a little bit of a bonus tip that comes with that is to absolutely have another hobby outside of tech. I'm very interested in a couple of different sports. I coach flag football, done number of different things that's not related to technology. And I found that I'm a bit of a better person when I actually do other things besides tech. And I would even say be even careful if your hobby intersects too much with technology. Something again, just like what Jeremy was stating, pulling weeds is a very like a simple process. You pick a weed, you pull it. I do lots of grass mowing. I've got flowers and things like that at my house. And I find a lot of inner peace by doing those things. And obviously, like grass cutting and stuff like that, I could easily hire that out. But that's just some good work that I just kind of enjoy doing myself. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and let's talk about the next part, which is a little bit more about personal branding. One thing that I have noticed and I've seen is that most developers have different places that they do build in public. Again, not all developers, but more and more developers. Things like Twitch, there is a live coding group that I've been a part of, the Live Coders, where we code live and let people check us out. YouTube is becoming a very interesting place for developers to start posting how they're working and how they're building things, blogs, social media, and things like that. And really, they're not just writing code, but they are sharing the process. I have a great friend named Jeffrey Fritz who has been doing this for a very long time, and he talks about how and why he's making these decisions as he goes down through it. So my question to the group here is, why do you think that the shift is starting to happen where some developers are becoming a little bit more public with some of the work that they're doing and sharing that?
It's kind of a wide, again, I keep going back that it's a wider phenomenon, right?
Yep.
We're here in New York today, and over the weekend, I got a burger with my buddy, and this lady comes in, and she's got like a camera strapped in front of her, and she's talking to somebody. There's nobody around, and she's talking to an audience of, I don't know, maybe 10 people on Twitch or something like that. And they're interacting with her, just watching her eat her burger, and she's like, she keeps showing them who's walking around her. She was definitely not famous, but I think, she built up her, whatever size community.
10.
Yeah, exactly. maybe even if it's 3. But and it was kind of wild because she's walking around almost kind of like this, like not cage, but almost like a box because it's holding like her audio and visual and everything. And I think that's just, I don't know, the world that we're living in is that so we're like cyborgs, half between real life and internet life, and who are our real friends and who's our audience. And it's like, especially with as technology, there's so many things to stay on top of. It's a lot easier maybe to find people to connect with online. And so then you can create that personal branding through a kind of authentic self and finding other people that are in the same interests. I mean, it's especially after COVID.
Yeah, I'd also say it feels like it's like level 3 of the resume, right? Like first there was a paper resume, then there's LinkedIn, and now there's like you have this online portfolio. And I think if you are someone that may be looking for a job or just wanting other people to know what you can do, I think it makes it makes it much easier to show other people what you can do. And I think on the flip side, if you're someone that's hiring that person, it's nice to see their personality or like what their interests are and things like that you can't necessarily get from just reading their resume or just reading text. So I think it could benefit in that way as well. And just and like you said, like that lady you saw a couple days ago, like we're just in a world where everyone has a camera or everyone has their own personal brand online, and it's really easy. You don't necessarily need to be like a famous influencer or anyone. You can just have an online presence and let that be your portfolio.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Obviously, I come from a place where I utilize this big time. I'm from a little small place in Alabama, and obviously Alabama is not known for their technology or anything of that nature. And so while I was working as a full-time developer outside of college, I knew pretty quickly on that I didn't actually want to be a full-time developer for, say, the rest of my life. So I started doing things like blogging. I bought my own domain name, which is very common. I started posting, tutorials and things like that. And then when some little small conferences came around me, I started applying for them. And shout out to CodeStock for one of the first conferences that allowed me to give my first speech. I still remember everything to this day about that. And so this kind of leads me into, do any of you think that personal branding is now very necessary in a sea of developers and job postings and things of that nature?
I don't think so, but I'd love to have more formulated thoughts on exactly why. I think that maybe what I'm thinking is that the personal branding, the various channels that we have these days are a medium, right? That you're going to show up on this social network or on that one or in video or in audio or whatever. It's a medium. It's a way of getting out, but it's not necessarily the character. For instance, if we go back to the hiring and the resumes, if I see somebody that has a very big presence online, is it because they have character? Sometimes it is. Sometimes people really blow up on social media. Their channels get really big because whenever their camera's rolling, their wisdom comes through their words, and so that then you can judge their character through it. But it in and of itself is not. Can we all agree that we've seen people that have big channels that don't necessarily have strong character?
Yeah. And one thing to add to that too is that I think, especially for developers, like before there was even like this, even thought of like going to social media, like developers were expected to have GitHubs, right? And like that was your portfolio.
Right.
So I think on the one hand, like it is nice. And I always think specifically about video because I know that's my domain, but like any like blog posts, whatever, like it's nice to have the GitHub, but also like hear whether it's the developer writes or makes a video, like hear about their thought process and how they built the code that they wrote.
Yeah.
But whether you need to be on social media specifically, I don't know. I think it's up for debate. It's don't necessarily have the answer, but.
Okay, that's excellent. Okay, so we're about to wrap up here. I do have one more question, but I'm going to give a little bit more of an introduction first. So I have a 18-year-old son, and he has a number of different friends that are right around his age range. They're about to head off to college in September to join an engineering school. And what I wanted to pose the question to the group here today is that if you were starting today, maybe you could rewind back the time and go back to a fresh 18-year-old, 19-year-old, or 20-year-old. What would you focus on in 2026?
What advice would you give them? Or if you were in their shoes, what would you do?
What would you do
Yeah.
if you were in their shoes?
Well, first of all, honestly, I would call into question whether or not whether you're going to college and you're going to this degree as a de facto or as a real intentional choice. Because I think that college is an excellent choice, but it's not the only choice. And a computer science degree, an engineering track is an excellent choice, but it's not the only choice. And so I would make sure that they've called that into question, because there may be something more specific that would be more suitable. So I'll leave my opinion there.
Yeah. I think it might be worth focusing on just being authentic to yourself. And I'll say from my own experience, like I studied engineering in college, and one, I did it because I was good at math and science, but two, I did it because there's job security and engineers got paid well, right? So I think my decision also hinged on the fact that there was a career at the end of the road for me. With such uncertainty with AI, and like we don't necessarily know what it's going to look like, I think the best thing that the younger generation can do right now is like study something that they're really interested in, right? Because at the end of the day, I think in a world of AI and robots running everything, the best thing that we can give is our authentic selves, and just be human, right, as we spoke about, right? So I think that's going to win. And we kind of see it now with social media, right? Like there's a ton of people that just get on TikTok or YouTube and just talk to the camera. And people love it because it's something that they connect with. And not saying, if you're young, you should like necessarily get into social media. But I guess my point is like there is a lot of value in just being yourself.
Listen, if I could go back to 18-year-old me and give him a few lessons, I feel like I could have avoided a lot of difficult lessons of learning everything the hard way, which maybe is the right way for some people. I think in 2026, you need to, I don't know, if I had like a younger brother or cousin or whatever, I would say that all of the degrees, to your point, you're saying, if you're going to learn like, I don't know, engineering or math or philosophy, all of these kind of studies where you learn a lot of stuff, but you really learn how to think.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing, is because things are changing so fast. It's not about learning specific, rules or certain books or, frameworks, because those are going to be changing all the time. But really pushing yourself to learn how to think and be flexible. And I still do think that maybe I had to learn all those hard lessons, because how do you find your path? It's by doing all the paths that don't work.
Yep.
Yeah. So like you just got to try a lot of stuff. Ideally, the more the better when you're younger and you have the energy and it hurts less to screw up, and you can rebound a lot faster. Mm-hmm. And I think, especially as what we were talking about before with AI, each individual person can do so many more things. So you can learn how to build, whether we're calling it coding anymore, or just building a product, doing also the distribution side of it. Now it's not just being an engineer, it's also doing the social media, thinking about, hey, how do I think if somebody actually going to use this thing? How are they actually going to want it? You might not like that, but I would tell your son and his friends, learn how to think, do a million things, all very easy, simple lessons. Mm-hmm.
Hey, that is still great advice, and I want to thank the Vonage team for hanging out with me a little bit today. Now, I will say we've learned a lot. The landscape has absolutely changed, but the opportunity remains if you focus on the things that really matter. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. If this podcast resonated with you, don't forget to share your comments in the channel below and like the video, and why not subscribe to the vonage-dev YouTube channel as well, as really we're all just trying to figure this out together. Thanks, team, for coming in, and I will see you on the next one.
For more information on any of Vonage's APIs and supported programming languages, subscribe to this YouTube channel, join our Slack community, and check out our blog at developer.vonage.com.